Hey everybody, this is a special early edition of Tao of the Day. Why? I don't know. I just felt like doing it this way. It's always great when we can just come on at 5 a.m. and talk about the Tao. I've been up for a little over an hour. I did a little meditation. I did some morning things as I want to do. And I just wanted to kind of, one of the great things about coming on early is that I don't often have guests. Now, that does not mean you shouldn't step up if you have a number between 1 and 81 you want to discuss. I am always open to discuss that. But as you guys know, I have been engaged in writing my own translation of the Tao. And yesterday I wrote a number of them and I read them over in the evening when I was talking to my love Andy Scarantino. And what ended up happening was I read them and I wasn't really centered. I wasn't really hearing them, I mean, I read them word for word, but I wasn't paying attention. So I wanted to come in and I just wanted to read, I don't know, these last four. I'm not even done with 48, but I might read that one as well. As I see them and uh, see what we have. I just want to be able to go through them and think about them here on the program and see if they make sense to me and if they're long or whatnot. Like I have to get rid of these ideas that they need to be short or they need to be like understood completely, or they need something other than what they have. I want to be able to just allow them to be in place as they are. So I'm going to read 44, um, and I'm going to just read mine. I'm not going to, there's no comparison or competing or anything. I'm just going to read this. I'm going to see, what do I think about it? And I'll talk about it a little bit. Fame or integrity? Of which of these do you focus on seeing and obtaining? Possessions or fulfillment? In which do you spend your time investing? Success or failure? Of which has offered you the most growth? Okay, so I want to read these a little differently now. Once again, if you have a number between 1 and 81, step up and I would love to read your Tao for the day. But I'm looking at a couple of the things that I've been writing recently for my rendition of the Tao. And here we are. I'm going to read 44 once again. Fame or integrity? Which of these do you focus on seeing and obtaining? Possessions or fulfillment? Which do you spend time investing? Success or failure? Of which has offered you the most growth? Under the influence, you spend yourself, accumulating only loss and regret. Fulfilling your needs, fulfill your needs and be content. Be a stranger to loss and regret. When you know excess is excessive, you'll be open to receiving harmony. See, I think this line, be a stranger to loss and regret, is really confusing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to look at this again. So if you're with me, you're just on this exploration with me. If you want to step up, definitely step up and I would be happy to read your Tao for the day. Fame or integrity? Which of these do you focus on seeing and obtaining? Possessions or fulfillment? In which do you spend time investing? Success or failure? Of which has offered you the most growth? Under the influence, you spend yourself, accumulating only loss and regret. Fulfill your needs and be content. When you know excess is excessive, you'll be open to receiving harmony. So when I talk about when you know excess is excessive here, as I have expressed it, when you know excess is excessive, and then we look at the pairs that we started with, because these all have to, like I want, like one of the things that I want is to make sure that like all of these things are clear. When we talk about excess and under the influence, we're looking at fame, possessions, and success, right? Success, possessions, and fame all can be had in some quantitative way. Integrity, fulfillment, or failure, none of those are quantitative. They just kind of are always there. They're always these things that you can engage or not. You can either be fulfilled or you can have a failure that is, like, see, that's the thing. Failure can be, you can fail multiple times a day and it's not something that is an end. When you succeed at something, that's an end. A failure is really just a point that you decided to put your finger on. So maybe failure is not the word that I want here, but I think it is. Success or failure, which of these offered you most growth? And undoubtedly, the answer to these questions are going to be like, which of these do you focus on seeing and obtaining? The reason that I put in which do you focus on seeing or obtaining is because if you are focused on seeing fame, then you're creating a world that sees fame, right? If you focus on seeing integrity in others, right? Like seeing it in others, if you focus on seeing fame in others rather than seeing the integrity in others, what are you spreading in the world? Now, which are you more interested in obtaining? That's another whole aspect. Which do you want, fame or integrity in your life? Hopefully you want integrity in life, but also what are you focused on seeing when you look outside of yourself? Are you focused on seeing fame or are you focused on seeing integrity? Which do you spend your time investing, possessions or fulfillment? Like, are you investing in feeling fulfilled or are you investing in getting possessions? And offered you the most growth, success, or failure? So my next line is, under the influence you spend yourself. Under the influence you spend yourself. When you are under the influence of something else, you are using your life as some commodity and you are spending yourself. It's like, once you spend it, you can't get it back. And this is why you accumulate only loss or regret. One of the things I talk about in my Recover Yourself work is when you live under the influence of other things, you lose yourself. You give up little bits of yourself. When someone tells you you're good at something, that's because they recognize something. That's not because you like it. It's not because you might be really good at it, but it might not be something you want to invest in. But when you get rewarded as a child, your first instinct is, well, let me continue investing in this because I was told I was good at it. So, fulfill your life with needs. Fulfill your needs and be content. When you know excess is excessive, you'll be open to receiving harmony. So, when we see like fame, everybody's famous to somebody. Everybody has possessions. Everybody has success of some level. And so because of that, what we get to experience when we start looking down at this other line, when you know excess is excessive, like, we have some success. We all have some success. We all have some possessions. We all have some fame. We're all famous to somebody, right? So, like, when we want more, when we want to start to, put all those things on a scale and say, I want more of these things. Well, that's when we start looking at it and can't be content with what we have. So that's what this 44 kind of goes into. And I think that expresses it very nicely. I'm really happy with that. All right. So then I have 45. I'm going to go ahead and read 45. To not define your accomplishments, you will always have patience to spare. To not acknowledge your fullness, you will always have space to spare. When we define something as straight, we see how crooked it is. When we define something as skilled, we focus on how clumsy they are. When we define someone as skilled, we focus on how clumsy they are. When we call a speech eloquent, we notice the stammering therein. The master needn't define things. What they are will arise naturally. By removing herself and her need to know, she can see Tao express itself fully. So on this one, um, it's all about defining, right? And I titled this one "Beware of Words with Meaning" because that's what this one is about. It's about having an expectation, and what happens when we have an expectation. To not define your accomplishments, you will always have space to spare. You will always have patience to spare. Sorry. So to not define your accomplishments, you will always have patience to spare. What does that mean? So patience comes, patience is interesting here because it is like, well, what do accomplishments and patience have to do with one another? Well, when you have not accomplished something, you focus and you focus on trying to achieve that accomplishment. And that focus within you is patience. That ability to be patient in this moment, that ability to be calm in the face of a challenge. But when you define your accomplishments and you say, oh, well, I've done this and I've done this and I've done that, like I talk to a lot of people, healers, coaches, whatever, and they always say, but I've been doing this for so long. That's defining your accomplishments. And defining your accomplishments and thinking that you don't have to do it anymore is why not defining your accomplishments will always have patience. Means you will always have patience to spare. Because when you define your accomplishments and you say, oh, but I've been doing this for 20 years, I don't give a fuck how long you've been doing it. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. You've done it, so what? Like, why does that mean you don't have to do it now? Right? You're less patient when you describe yourself as being someone who has done this, who has accomplished something already. You haven't accomplished anything. You're here now. This is the moment that you live in. Not it's not that you have gone through stuff. It is that you are here now. To acknowledge your fullness, you will always have. To not acknowledge your fullness, you will always have space to spare. Now, this is an interesting one, and I might have to change fullness um, to something a little more tangible, because as I'm looking at the word fullness and then space and saying, okay, those things are good, but what I'm talking about is like energy, right? To not acknowledge your, how full of energy you are ever, right, will always give you more energy, right? Like the moment you say, I have all of this energy, then all you can do from that point forward is see how in comparison you are not you don't have as much energy as you did. How in comparison that is no longer the case. Once you say, I am full, this is great, well, tomorrow you're not going to be able to meet that standard. And so you're going to criticize tomorrow because you can't reach that standard. And then all of a sudden, down the hole you go into this idea. I don't know that I've ever had the complete fullness that I did that one day, that one experience. So to not acknowledge your fullness, to never acknowledge how much energy you do have or don't have, and you just do what you do, whether you sleep or eat or whatever it is right now. A lot of people, even I get caught in, I have a low energy day. What does that mean? Low energy day. Compared to what? This is the day you're having. There's no reason to to define it, right? So every time you come up to a word that defines something, you want to separate yourself from it. To not define your accomplishments, you will always have patience to spare, because you won't have to define them by going back and saying, "Oh, here I am," you know. So if you're just joining me, this is Tao of the Day. I am just reading through a couple of the translations that I've been writing. If you have a number between 1 and 81 you wanna engage with, definitely step up and let me know, and we'll read your Tao for the day. All right, as this one continues, to not define your accomplishments, you will always have patience. To not acknowledge your fullness, you will always have space to spare. When we define something as straight, we see how crooked it is. When we define someone as skilled, we focus on how clumsy they are. When we call a speech eloquent, we notice the stammering therein. The master needn't define things. What they are will naturally arise. By removing herself and letting her need and by removing herself and her need to know, she can see Tao express itself fully. So in this last line, so first off, like the definitions, right? When we define something as straight, we see how crooked it is. This is why when we define our accomplishments, we immediately focus on how much more we have to do, right? When we define when we acknowledge our fullness, we see immediately um, how much space we don't have, right? Like once we define how full we are at this moment, we see when that fullness is taxed in any way. I don't know another better word for that. But so now we move into these definitions. When we define something as straight, we see how crooked it is. When we define someone as skilled, we see how clumsy they are. When we call a speech eloquent, we notice the stammering therein. And all of this is about trying to understand what really happens when we define things. Because we are not defining things and embracing them as the definition, just being like, wow, this is fullness. No matter what this is fullness. No matter what this is straight. No matter what this is skilled. No matter what this is eloquent. But as soon as you define it, you start to challenge those definitions. And that's a natural thing, because we probably shouldn't be defining things anyway, right? Nature doesn't define things, right? Nature just does things. And as it does things, it experiences what it experiences. So because of that, like, that's why we want to beware of words with meaning, because when we get into the quagmire of defining things, we start defining ourselves along the way. The master needn't define things. What they are will arise naturally. And it's interesting. I mean, I keep coming into this idea of this line, what they are will arise naturally. What they are is the things. What the things are will arise naturally. So I want to make sure that that's clear. So the master needn't define things. What they are will arise naturally. So by removing herself and her need to know, she can see Tao express itself fully. And what that's saying is, by removing herself, by allowing herself not to be defined, and by removing her need to know what everything else is, she removes her need to know what's eloquent, she removes her need to know what's skilled, what's straight, she removes the need to know what her accomplishments are. Because when she can not define her accomplishments, her patience will be immediately improved. She can see Tao express itself fully. She can see Tao express itself fully in those things around her. When she defines things, we always, there's one thing I say, you always perceive yourself, right? It's what you perceive. It's not It's not what you're seeing. You're not seeing the truth. You're seeing your perception. And your perception gets mangled in the whole defining thing. If you believe something is straight and you perceive it as straight, well, once you see something wrong with it, once you understand the definition of straight, you're going to challenge it and its ability to be straight. But you're not challenging its ability to be straight. You're challenging your definition of straight. And that's the thing that this is saying. It's like you really want to be able to look at the way you define the world around you and ask yourself, is it that thing that I'm defining, if it's not matching up to my definition, is it wrong or am I? Now, you also have to look at that towards yourself. When you judge yourself out here in the world, like, is it the definition and the assumption that you have made about where you're supposed to be or whatever? Or is it you that's wrong or that is out of place or whatever the case might be? You know, like those are big questions. The master needn't define things. What they are will arise naturally. By removing herself and her need to know, she can see Tao express itself fully, both in herself and in other things. So I'm going to move on to 46. This is the last one, I think. No, 46 and then 47, which is the last ones that I wrote yesterday. So 46 I titled Knowing When to Stop. And that's always important, right? Like, how many of us don't know when to stop? All right, so what this states, how I express this, is when Tao is followed, shelter, food, and water are prioritized. Going counter to Tao, excess and hoarding are praised. He who believes there isn't enough is cursed to never have enough. He who believes he must acquire will acquire nothing that lasts. There is no greater waste of time or energy than being discontent. Therefore, the master knows what is enough and is content to stop there. So this starts with this idea of when the Tao is followed, shelter, food, and water are prioritized. Now, we end with, therefore, the master knows what is enough and is content to stop there. Shelter, food, and water. If every person has that, we all live beautiful lives. And we will each engage in the world according to Tao. How could we not? We are, you know, if we all have food, shelter, and water, then we will have neighbors and we will have friends and we will have, like, we will play games and we will have time, and there was all of these things, like hunter gatherers had it really, really right, because they set traps, and then they'd go along and they would, like, just kind of pick up the they would go and collect their traps a couple times a day, and then they'd come home and they'd have their shelters that they would build, and then they would just commute, and this is food, shelter, and water are prioritized. Going counter to Tao, war, excess, and hoarding are praised. I mean, if we look at the world today, we look at what we're doing today, right? These are the things that we're really running into. The fact that people want excess, they want more and more and more and more and more and more. And they're hoarding. They can be people hoarding money, people hoarding things, people like wanting more and more possessions all the time. And then there's war, and that's happening. I mean, yeah, okay, maybe we're in a peaceful time right now, and that's good, as we are kind of maybe moving closer to Tao. I mean, I'm writing this, and so it's inspiring more and more people. Not my writing, but it's inspired me. Tao has inspired me, and it's inspired others to, be more peaceful and see that, these are really food, shelter, and water are the things that we need. So, he who believes there isn't enough is cursed to never have enough. He who believes he must acquire will acquire nothing that lasts. Now, those two are about going counter to Tao, right? Going counter to Tao, war, excess, and hoarding are praised. He who believes there isn't enough, this is excess, this is hoarding, and this could be war as well. He who believes he must acquire, once again, excess, hoarding, and war, acquiring space, acquiring people, acquiring things, whatever, will acquire nothing that lasts. Then the final lines here: there is no greater waste of time or energy than being discontent. Right? He who believes there isn't enough, you aren't content with this moment. He who believes he must acquire, you aren't content with what you have. There is no greater waste of time or energy than being discontent. Therefore, the master knows what is enough and is content to stop there. And this is such a, like, it's such a beautiful concept, right? The master knows what is enough and is content to stop there. Are we able to stop when we've had enough, when we have food, when we have shelter, when we have water, when all of those things are provided right now? Can we stop and just appreciate that? Can we stop trying to get more and more and more and more and more? Is that possible, that we can just stop and say, hey, that's enough right now? And if I have these things, well, then I don't have to look into the future and worry about not having them. I don't have to look, like, they're here now. They just exist as they are. Okay, so that was 46. 47, I think this is going to be the last one that I read today, because I don't believe I've finished 48. Or I'm not going to engage in 48, just because I'm not exactly sure if I'm done with it yet. So we'll read 47, and then I will have, I think I started with 44. So I think I'll have read 4 different translations. And I think all of these 4 were ones that I read, or that I wrote yesterday. So, okay, so engaging with manifestation is how I express number 47. What this states is, you can understand all things touched by Tao without leaving your room. You can see all things touched by Tao without opening your eyes. The more you trust the manifestation, the less you trust yourself. Thus, the master never engages manifestation without first having engaged herself. In so doing, she achieves everything without ever having considered it. So this one, when you can understand all things, you can understand all things touched by Tao without leaving your room. You can see all things touched by Tao without opening your eyes. Now, what that expresses is, like, there's poeticism in there, but what it allows us to do is it allows us to kind of be in the space of being like, okay, well, I don't know what's been touched by Tao, but I can touch it and I can see it. Even if Tao, created the planet Pluto, I can understand Pluto without ever leaving this planet. I can understand the depths of the universe without ever leaving my room. Now, that is an abstract concept, but what we have in the next line sort of, I hope, helps to wrap that up into less abstraction. The more you trust the manifestation, the less you trust yourself. Meaning, if you have to leave your room, if you have to go somewhere in order to engage something, then you're trusting the manifestation much more than you're trusting yourself. If you have to open your eyes to see something, you're trusting the manifestation more than you're trusting yourself. And I know I do this. There are times where I'm hiking, and I close my eyes and see how far I can walk before I am called to, out of fear and out of distrust for myself, ultimately, distrust for my ability to, you know, feel my way through the woods. And, sometimes it's 3 steps. Sometimes I can do, 60, but Usually that's because I'm on a straight path and I saw that in advance, right? Like, so, how much am I trusting, my memory of the manifestation, and how much am I trusting myself really? Right? So the more you trust manifestation, the less you trust yourself. And it's a big question. Like, how much do you trust what you see versus how much do you trust you, like what you feel and what you see within yourself and how you engage? Now, thus the master never engages manifestation without first having engaged herself. See, that's the paradox we get in, because we engage the manifestation first. And it was important to do that because as a species we needed to survive. If we didn't engage in the manifestation, we wouldn't have survived, like, you know as a species. So what we get to experience now is trying to take off those layers. I mean, Dr. Rao here on Wisdom, and he's been on this show many, many times. He always talks about, it's not about obtaining something. You have it, you were born with it, it's there. You are just covering it up with doubt. And thus the master never engages manifestation without first having engaged herself. She had to, the first time she engaged herself, she had to remove the influence of manifestation, and then she was able to engage herself. And then, in so doing, she achieves everything without ever having considered it. She never considered achieving anything, and everything gets achieved. You know, here in the manifestation, you consider it first, and then you attempt to do it. But when you follow Tao, you don't consider it, and it gets done. And that's the way that we can engage in the world in a, in a healthier way. So you can understand all things touched by Tao without leaving your room. You can see all things touched by Tao without opening your eyes. The more you trust the manifestation, the less you trust yourself. Thus, the master never engages manifestation without first having engaged herself. In so doing, she achieves everything without ever having considered it. Thank you so much for joining me for Tao of the Day. I'm really grateful for anybody who has listened and who is engaging. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope you get something out of it. And if you are benefiting from the work I do, consider sending me a tip through Venmo at martinjohn_Garcia. You can come to my website. You can find that in my profile, but you can also DM me um, at Martin John over on Instagram or Twitter. I love you guys. Thank you so much. And until next time, keep recovering yourself.